In 2008, in a small hotel in southern France, Mathyas stood on the terrace, gazing at the scenery that was completely different from his hometown, and a smile appeared on his face. He always felt that the sunshine in Provence was brighter and more radiant than that in his hometown of Quebec. Mathyas used to be a manager at an advertising company in Canada, but the heavy pressure gradually made him weary of the job, commuting back and forth with no fun at all. He thought to himself, why should he spend his whole life repeating the same work at such a young age? So, one ordinary afternoon, he resolutely quit his job and set off for Provence. Quitting without another job lined up is fine, but the premise is that you need to have money. With very little savings left, Mathyas never found a job he truly wanted. Until one day, Mathyas walked into a second-hand bookstore, and his attention was drawn to books about shepherds on the shelves. The books said that shepherding is one of the oldest human activities, dating back to 6,000 years ago, and that shepherds spend most of their time grazing in open, remote wilderness. This job, close to nature and away from the hustle and bustle of the outside world, struck Mathyas almost instantly. What he wanted was a vast world where he could walk alone. He wished he could become a wandering shepherd in the next moment. Mathyas bought a handcrafted shepherd's knife and immediately asked the owner how he could become a shepherd. The owner replied, "If you have a wife and kids, this is not suitable for you. If you are a single man, this job is absolutely perfect, free and unburdened, a home wherever you go." After learning the address of a tavern where livestock breeders gathered, Mathyas stepped forward and candidly admitted that he had never tended sheep, but he was willing to start as an apprentice and could work at any time. After Mathyas introduced his basic situation, a group of elderly people in the audience burst into laughter. Where did this foolish kid come from, giving up a good job in the city to come to the countryside to be a shepherd? However, to be honest, the industrialized farming promoted by the government over the years has nearly destroyed everything. Those large machines have polluted many pastures, and due to the strenuous nature of the work, very few young people are willing to engage in it. Now, shepherds in Provence are extremely scarce, and the breeder Richard is willing to give Mathyas a chance. After Mathyas arrived at the farm, he first built the sheep-shearing pen as instructed. But when he tried to herd the sheep inside, the sheep pushing against him nearly made him lose his balance. The flock gathered together, like a flowing pool of living water. Mathyas understood that he had to learn to integrate into this flow, to follow and adapt to them. And Mathyas had always dreamed of becoming a writer. He hoped to find sincerity and simplicity through this intimate contact with nature. Despite being clumsy and causing some trouble for his employer, the shepherd's initial experience in the morning gave Mathyas a good feeling. Imagining himself as a sheep, blending in and leading the flock seemed not too difficult. A few more days of practice would be enough. A seasoned person warned Mathyas, "Having skills isn't enough. You need passion. You must genuinely like these sheep, and you have to hold them as gently as possible so they won't struggle when shearing." But just at lunchtime, a headhunter suddenly challenged Mathyas. His job was not only to find shepherds for various employers, but also to report illegal workers. The headhunter wanted to know if this young man who had come all the way from Canada was indeed a legal worker. Under the scrutinizing gaze, Mathyas awkwardly lowered his head because he did not have a work visa. As soon as lunch ended, Richard sent Mathyas away because his knowledge of the ranch was almost zero. He couldn't even tell the difference between breeding sheep and lambs, and his presence would only create chaos. It was the busy spring season, and the ranch had no time to train a newcomer from scratch. Mathyas decided to take it slow and first went to the agency to apply for a work visa. However, the counter staff, Élise, informed him that to apply for a work visa, he had to apply in Canada before departure. But Mathyas had no way back. He had spent all his savings and left everything behind to come to France, with the only belief of becoming a shepherd and finding the meaning of his existence in this profession that coexists with nature. Élise did not expect that this disheveled man in front of her harbored such a romantic spirit that was so out of touch with contemporary society. She already loved reading philosophy books, and Mathyas's pure dedication secretly won her some affection. Lowering her voice, she mysteriously told Mathyas, "Since that's the case, why not work illegally? If you don't say anything, who will know? The playful smile on her face made Mathyas's heart stir. Mathyas insisted on getting an application form, but only wrote down his contact information. Élise understood and quietly slipped the note into her pocket, looking forward to the next encounter with Mathyas. Before long, Mathyas's opportunity finally arrived. A farmer named Thelier and his wife ran a farm with 2 sheep pens housing 1,000 sheep. Currently, there was only one shepherd named Ahad taking care of them, but Ahad was getting old, and the couple was urgently in need of an apprentice to help out. Thelier gave Mathyas a heads up. This job will be tougher than you think. A shepherd has to work every day until sunset, and sometimes, when it gets busy, they have to stay up late into the night. Mathyas was not afraid at all, since he had made up his mind to be a shepherd and pursue the meaning of life he sought. His accommodation was arranged in a shabby hut right next to the sheep pen. All night long, the bleating of the sheep echoed, and he hardly closed his eyes. Yet, his heart was filled with excitement for the shepherd life that was about to begin. Despite not having rested well, Mathyas still sat at the door early in the morning, playing with a nearby stray dog while waiting for the shepherd Ahad to appear. Before Ahad even got close, he shouted for Mathyas to chase away the filthy dog covered in fleas. His irritability and harshness made Mathyas involuntarily frown. It was just a gentle little dog. There was no need to be so fierce. But he knew in his heart that from today on, Ahad would be his teacher, and he had to suppress any objections and humbly learn. Before starting work, Ahad asked him why he wanted to be a shepherd. Mathyas said he liked the profession and loved the sheep. Ahad immediately interrupted him. "What do you mean you like them? You must not like these things. You have to show these filthy creatures who's boss, or else they will walk all over you." A shepherd's eyes must be able to spot sick sheep in the flock immediately. The first lesson of the day was for Ahad and Telai to teach Mathyas how to catch the sheep that was acting strangely. There was no need for gentle soothing, nor did he have to go with the flow like merging into water. He just needed to be a bit tougher, like dealing with a bad person, and directly tackle the sick sheep to the ground. After that, Ahad personally taught Mathyas how to swing the shepherd's staff and what commands to use to make the flock obey. Although the sheep couldn't speak, they had fixed grazing paths. In the morning, they would be active in the east, and in the afternoon, they would move to the west. During the days of learning with Ahad, Mathyas gradually became familiar with the shepherding process. In the early morning, he would get up to check the condition of the flock, and in the evening, he would drive the sheep back home. Mathyas often felt too tired to stand up straight, but the physical exhaustion brought him spiritual richness. Every night when he returned to the hut, he would take up his pen to jot down his insights from the day's grazing. "When my muscles ache unbearably, I realize that since I threw everything away to chase that seemingly unrealistic shepherd dream, I have come this far. I am waiting for the mountain that can grant the ewes grass and give the shepherd the sky. One day, I will write my own chapter." Before long, Mathyas was able to lead the flock on his own. But that morning, he was startled awake by angry shouts coming from the sheep pen. The owner Telai was furious with the flock, smashing water buckets and kicking the rails, his face full of agitation. It turned out that scabies, a highly contagious disease, had quietly spread among the sheep. Now every sheep needed to be injected for treatment, but Telai had always treated the sheep as mere tools for making money, and injecting hundreds of sheep would undoubtedly be a significant expense. In his anger, he cursed every sheep with the most unpleasant insults. The foul language mixed with the soft bleating of the sheep drifted into Mathyas's ears, and he couldn't help but feel sympathy. During the injection period, Thelier discovered that a ewe's condition had deteriorated to the point of having rotten intestines, and saving it would require more money. Ultimately, at Thelier's suggestion, Aisha took the ewe to an open area outdoors, preparing to give it a swift end. When the blade was aimed at the ewe's neck, Mathyas saw the ewe's wet eyes. It seemed completely unaware of what it would face in the next moment, lying obediently on the ground, allowing the blade to pierce its skin. After the disease outbreak, the weather became increasingly hot, and the nearby grass gradually turned yellow, leaving the flock in urgent need of fresh forage. Mathyas couldn't wait to ask Aisha when they could go into the mountains to graze. Aisha was momentarily puzzled, wondering if Mathyas had gone mad. The mountain environment was much harsher than here, with no sign of a person from dawn till dusk. The only companions were sheep, and staying there too long could drive a person insane. Meanwhile, Mathyas continued to document his life and maintained contact with the civil servant Élise. Through his humorous and profound writing, Élise became filled with anticipation for the shepherd's life. It was a pastoral paradise far removed from the secular world, seemingly rippling with unreal romanticism, yet so close and within reach. If given the chance, she also wanted to go sheep herding. That day, Élise just wanted to take a day off. She wanted to temporarily escape the mountains of paperwork that piled up in the office, but her boss refused her request. Élise decided not to argue any further and resolutely resigned from this high-paying job. Compared to living twisted in the whirlpool of the secular world, it was better to rush towards the pastoral land described by Mathyas, to feel the warmth while under the sunlight, and to listen to the flocks leisurely bleating on the meadow. Even if life was simpler, at least her heart would be free. So, that morning, Élise arrived at the farm where Mathyas was located according to the address. But as soon as she arrived, she saw Mathyas holding a lamb, deeply saddened. It turned out that Telier had woken up in a bad mood that morning and, in a fit of anger, slammed the door so hard that it killed the lamb. Not only did he show no remorse, but he also cursed under his breath and walked away. In the end, it was Mathyas who dug a grave and buried the lamb. At that moment, Mathyas looked at this fragile life that had been easily crushed and recalled the days when Aisha taught him to be harsher with the sheep, as well as Telier's indifference when calculating the treatment costs for sick sheep. A surge of anger welled up in his heart. The farm was filled with violence, and neither Aisha nor Telier showed any respect for life. This was not the paradise he had envisioned. Mathyas felt sorry for having romanticized this period of life with his words and deceiving Élise into coming here. Élise, however, did not care. In her view, the problem was not with the land, nor with Mathyas's dream of seeking the meaning of life, but rather with Ihai's rudeness and Taylie's indifference, which turned what should have been a gentle countryside into a place filled with hostility. Élise's words swept away the gloom in Mathyas's heart. He decided to leave the farm after finishing this quarter because he could no longer bear to watch life slip away meaninglessly. Just as this thought settled in, the sound of an engine suddenly roared outside, mixed with Taylie's angry curses. Mathyas hurried outside to check, only to find that Taylie's newly bought rams refused to breed with the ewes, which made him so furious that he wanted to run over the sheep with his car. At that moment, Mathyas could no longer tolerate it. He was fed up with Taylie's indifference to life and tired of enduring like a bound slave. Mathyas immediately returned to the house, quickly packed his bags, and pulled Élise out of the farm gate. What he did not expect was that the sheepdog named Aura from the farm also followed them. So the two of them and one dog returned to town without looking back. The shepherds, who had a deep impression of Mathyas, saw a delicate girl by his side and immediately began to mock him, saying that if Élise followed him to herd sheep, she probably wouldn't last 3 weeks. However, Élise was not one to be easily provoked. She splashed her drink on the mocking shepherd, and the scene fell silent. Mathyas felt that he had dragged Élise into this, but she advised him not to take it to heart, and instead, she wanted to learn how to herd sheep properly with Mathyas, such as identifying sick sheep and the skills of herding with commands. However, both of them were uncertain about which farm would be willing to accept them next. Just then, the farmer Cecil found them. The shepherd he had originally hired had quit because he felt too lonely, so Cecil was specifically looking for a pair of partners who could look out for each other and not feel lonely. He had just heard that Mathyas had left with a young lady from Taylor and immediately rushed over. Cecil told them that he had about 800 ewes that had just been bred and needed someone to lead them to graze in the Alps. For this task, each person could earn 4,000 euros. If they were willing, they would set off for the mountains in half an hour. Since it was Élise's first time herding sheep, Cecil took them to the farm first to see how well they could actually handle the flock. Before driving the sheep into the pen, Mathyas reminded Élise not to panic. She only needed to guide the lead sheep towards the pen, and the other sheep would naturally follow without having to chase the whole flock around. Élise kept this advice in mind, her gaze fixed on the lead sheep. The shepherd dog, Aura, was also busy, running lightly around the edge of the flock, barking occasionally to herd any sheep trying to stray back into the group. The three of them, 2 people and 1 dog, worked together seamlessly, and it didn't take long to successfully drive the flock into the pen. Watching from the side, Cecil was very satisfied. Élise and Mathyas did even better than he had expected. Now he could rest easy, knowing the flock had reliable caretakers. Before setting off, Élise marked each sheep as required. Considering it was the first time for both of them to independently manage a large-scale sheep migration, Cecil made thorough arrangements. Along the way, he would have experienced Shepherd Pierre accompany them, specifically to teach them how to manage the entire flock using only their experience and skills without external assistance. After they successfully guided the sheep through the canyon, another shepherd, Dudu, would take over to accompany them for the rest of the journey, and Cecil himself would also appear to bring supplies. Once the travel route was confirmed, Mathyas and Élise set off with the sheep. The copper bell on the lead sheep's neck jingled continuously, and the flock, like clumps of cotton, crowded along the narrow path. The whole scene was both lively and spectacular. The encounters along the way were particularly vivid. An old lady passing by gave Élise a scarf to keep warm. A driver, blocked by the flock, rolled down his window and cursed, but seeing the sheep leisurely crossing the road, he ultimately just honked in resignation. Mathyas's mindset had long since lost its initial naivety. Migration, after all, was about bringing the flock to a place with grass. It was not just poetic, but a matter of grass and survival. The road ahead was long and arduous, and thousands of shepherds and flocks had walked it in the past. He was ready to face all the challenges on the journey. In the distance, the peaks gradually revealed their snowy tops, and the sunlight spilled over the mountains like a layer of gold foil. When Mathyas grew tired, he would lie on the grass, gazing at the vast sky above, knowing that their shepherding journey was about to unfold on this land. As they passed through a small grove, Mathyas spotted a newborn lamb by the roadside. He didn't rush to continue. Instead, he contacted a nearby ranch to inquire, and eventually helped the little lamb find its original shepherd, feeling relieved only after watching it being carried away before continuing on. Élise, however, clearly underestimated the hardships of migration. After crossing the canyon, she looked at her bloodied feet and sighed helplessly. But throughout, Élise never uttered a word about giving up. The stream flowing down from the mountains was cold and clear, washing away the blood from her feet and dispersing the dust of the journey. After resting enough, she put her shoes back on and continued walking forward with Mathyas. According to the original plan, they finally met up with Cecil, Pierre, and others in the open area deep in the canyon. Pierre brought a warning from the ranger, stating that there had been recent sightings of wolf packs. However, wolves hadn't been seen here for many years, and it was estimated that ecological destruction elsewhere had driven the wolves here. Even if there were wolves, Pierre wasn't worried at all. He patted the hunting rifle hanging at his waist and spoke with the toughness of an old shepherd. This hunting rifle of mine is no joke. We shepherds have lived alongside our flocks for thousands of years, relying on our ability to protect the livestock. If someone were to punish me for killing a wolf that harms sheep, I wouldn't mind hanging the wolf's corpse on the lamppost outside the town hall for everyone to judge. The flock needed to stay here for a while, eating plenty of tender grass to grow fat before continuing their journey. During this time, Mathyas and Élise lived in a simple makeshift hut with a roof covered in hay and wooden boards enclosing it on all sides. Though modest, it could shield them from wind and rain. The two took turns each day leading the flock to find the best grazing pastures. Most of the time, it didn't take much effort because the flock remembered the way. They recognized the familiar pasture and knew where the grass was tenderer and where the stream water was sweeter. The newly arrived lambs instinctively followed the adult sheep, a unique memory belonging to the flock, not taught by anyone, but ingrained in their bones through generations of migration. Life as a shepherd in the mountains became increasingly vivid each day. Here, the boundaries between work and leisure gradually blurred, and the sheep almost became Mathyas's entire life. During the day, he led the flock across the meadows, and while the sheep grazed, he would quietly slip into the mountains, the cool stream water flowing over his skin, washing away the fatigue of days of travel. At night, lying in the humble hut, he couldn't help but worry about a sudden pack of wolves startling the sleeping flock. In this vast and desolate world, The only person Mathyas could talk to and relieve his boredom was Élise. Their relationship grew wildly like the grass on the mountains, herding sheep and watering them together during the day, sharing their thoughts by the campfire at night. When tired, they would lie under the sky, with the earth as their shelter, quietly cuddling together, as if only each other's breathing remained in the universe. Once, Mathyas wandered through a literary work in search of the meaning of existence, thinking the answer lay hidden in those intricate phrases. It was only at this moment that he realized he was wrong. Existence was never an abstract concept in books, but the pure snow scene on the unpolluted mountain top, the lush mountains before him that could sustain the flock. Just like the thousands of shepherds and their flocks before him, he and his sheep would spend the entire summer here, until the first snowflake drifted down from the mountains, and then they would follow the path back, bringing the fat sheep back to the warm sheepfold. Sometimes Dudu, who lives at the foot of the mountain, comes over to deliver supplies, and today he brought the ranger Daisy along to join the fun. As night fell, the four of them sat around a small wooden table, with the wine Dudu had brought, the rich liquid mixing with the warm yellow candlelight, dispelling the chill of the mountain night with their laughter and conversation. Mathyas and his companion's daily life seemed to revolve solely around herding sheep. But life in the mountains was never dull, always hiding unexpected variables, especially the weather, which could change at any moment. On this day, Mathyas was leading the flock to graze on the mountain when the sky darkened without warning, followed by a thunderous roar, and torrential rain poured down in an instant. The sheep huddled together in a panic, bleating in distress. But Mathyas couldn't leave even a step. These 800 sheep were both his responsibility and his companions, and he had to bring them all back safely. Determined, Mathyas dashed into the storm, shouting shepherds' calls to calm the flock, running back and forth around the group to herd the straying lambs back to the center, inching towards the little cabin. Meanwhile, Élise inside was growing anxious, holding the radio that had long lost signal, pressing replay repeatedly, but only hearing static noise. After what felt like an eternity, the rain finally stopped, and the faint light breaking through the clouds illuminated Mathyas's figure. He appeared in Élise's sight with a smile, his face full of confidence and pride. Not a single one lost, not a single one missing. Behind Mathyas was the neatly organized flock, and Élise, seeing him return safely, finally felt her anxious heart settle. Days flowed by like the streams in the mountains, but after enjoying the pastoral life for too long, Élise's anxiety about the future quietly surfaced. Quitting her civil service job to herd sheep in the mountains had been an impulsive decision. The rented apartment in the city had not been returned, and every month, rent, internet fees, and utility bills were still being deducted from her bank account. Once this herding trip ended, she would have to return to the familiar city, reapply for jobs, go to interviews, and endure the pressures of making a living, continuing the kind of life that was always chasing after trivial matters. Just thinking about her past mundane routine and the possibility of repeating that life in the future made Élise feel overwhelmed. Mathyas understood her anxiety. After all, wasn't he in the same situation? Leaving behind the familiar city, stable income, and close friends, giving up everything he had to chase a vague hope and travel far to become a shepherd in Provence. Perhaps when this journey ended, he still wouldn't be able to write a satisfactory piece, still wouldn't become a writer, but so what? Look at this vast blue sky, look at this endless green grass, look at these leisurely sheep. Beautiful things are right in front of us. Enjoy the present. Don't ruin today worrying about things that haven't even happened yet. If it weren't for Dudu occasionally bringing some fresh news from down the mountain, Mathyas would almost feel that the mountain and the valley below were two completely different worlds. Life on the mountain consisted only of flocks, early mornings, and the weather. Time passed slowly, so slowly that one could forget there were bills and bustling crowds down below. Today, Dudu said that the French Ministry of Agriculture had recently introduced a new policy aimed at regulating livestock farming. But with all the rules and regulations, life for shepherds like him, who relied on traditional grazing, would become much harder. Dudu planned to join a protest, and without hesitation, Mathyas went along. This was his first time leaving the mountains since he had come up, the first time leaving Élise, leaving the sheep that woke up to his calls every day, leaving the grass dew that would wet his pants in the morning, leaving the starry night sky where he could see the Milky Way. Mathyas watched the green mountains gradually disappear, and as gas stations and convenience stores came into view, he suddenly realized that since the beginning of his migration, he had established a symbiotic relationship with the mountain, the sheep, and Élise. He protected the flock accompanied him, and the mountain provided them with a place to rest. But this moment of departure felt like a crack had been dug into this relationship, leaving a sense of emptiness. Only at this moment did Mathyas fully understand that the well-dressed self he had left behind in the advertising company was far away in Canada. Now his body, his breath, and even his soul had completely belonged to this mountain. So Mathyas did not plan to stay long. He would return quickly after resting for one night after the protest. But on the very night he left, something happened to the flock. The next morning, when Élise went out to graze the sheep, she found that the flock was nowhere to be seen. Remembering what the ranger had mentioned about wolves being around, her heart sank. Just as she was anxiously pacing, Mathyas finally rushed back. The two of them searched the usual grazing areas of the flock, but found nothing. Mathyas suddenly noticed a few vultures circling in the sky. These birds only eat carrion and would never linger in one spot for no reason. He immediately sensed that something was wrong and walked toward the vultures, where he indeed discovered a chewed-up sheep leg on the ground. A few steps further, he found a ewe curled up on the ground, covered in wounds, her wool soaked in blood, with only faint breaths left. It was evident that the flock had been attacked by wolves the previous night. To end the sheep's suffering, Mathyas closed his eyes and took out his knife. He followed the method taught to him by the old shepherd, Ihwa, and swiftly made a clean cut at the ewe's neck. This was the cruelest aspect of nature. The sheep had no power to resist against the wolf pack, and those wolves were not even hunting for food, but merely tore lives apart for their own amusement. Mathyas squatted on the ground, watching the ewe gradually lose her breath, filled with resentment. He hated himself for not returning in time last night, hated himself for leaving the inexperienced Élise alone on the mountain, and hated himself for not being able to protect this flock that trusted him. The two finally found the flock, but they had lost a total of 30 sheep. Upon hearing the news, the employer Cecil was furious, as a good shepherd would never leave the flock. In his anger, he wanted to fire the two. However, the flock had become a part of Mathyas's life, and he was unwilling to end it just like that. Moreover, it was evident that Mathyas and his companion had taken great care of the flock. The sheep they retrieved were all healthy and robust. This loss of sheep was merely due to bad luck in encountering a pack of wolves. Once Cecil's anger subsided, he no longer mentioned the firing, but instead sent supplies with doudou for them, and then returned to the farm, waiting for Mathyas and his companion to safely bring the sheep back.